turning into a very odd episode. That's creepy, isn't it? Give us some information. I'll give you some cash for some information. Just reading that makes you go a bit, ugh. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rwanda Now and Then, where I go back through a diary that I kept for 2 years as a VSO volunteer from 2007 to 2009 in Rwanda. And in the last episode, we just completed my first training course, my first of 3 training courses at Harborne Hall, which was kind of like Hogwarts for international volunteers. So if you've missed anything, I shall leave the playlist below. You can go and catch up. In this episode, we're between training courses, so between the first and second Harborne Hall experience. And I thought I would take this chance to catch up on a few things that were going on at the time, and also to review the pre-departure information pack that we received almost 20 years ago before we left for our destination countries. So before I came to Rwanda, I was given a pack with some information in it about what to expect when I got here. So at the end of the video, we'll take a quick look through that because I don't know what's in it. I can't remember. I found it in a very old folder on my computer, and I think it could be an interesting thing to reminisce on. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're still in September 2007, pre-departure. I've got iced coffee. I've just learned how to make a really good iced coffee, and it's very warm here at the moment. So this is going to get me through this. So Monday the 17th of September, apparently my dad and his partner popped over. So Dad and Marilyn came over to help me to pack up my apartment. This is a picture of all of the books that were in my apartment at the time. So I was living in an attic above a gypsy jazz musician in Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales. And they came to help me just to pack it all up because, you know, you're going overseas for 2 years. You're not going to keep the place you're renting whilst you go. So I had a bit of a massive occult library, and you can see in the background some demijohns because I also used to make homemade wine. So books and wine was pretty much my life at that time. So yeah, we gave the wine equipment away to a friend, and then we went for food at the vegetarian food studio because Dad and Marilyn are vegetarian, and it's been 18 yees now, so almost 2 decades. Let's see if they're still going. Vegetarian Food Studio Cardiff. Wow. Oh my goodness. They are still in business almost 2 decades later. That's impressive. So if you're in Cardiff, drop on by. Oh, it's now a multi-award winning restaurant. Oh, that's impressive. What did I say about it? We adjourned to the vegetarian food studio for a magnificent lunch where we ate ourselves silly. So even back when it first opened, it was a really good place to go. Looks like it's done even better since then. That's really cool. That's really cool. You know, so many of these links on my blog don't work anymore that, you know, when you find one that does, it's cheerful. It's nice to see. So yeah, Dad and Marilyn then took some stuff off to Gloucester, and I drove to my mum's in the Midland with all of my books, and I dumped them on my mum, and then the next day I drove back to Cardiff. That's quite a long round trip actually. But, you know, I was in my 20s, so, you know, doing a whole day road trip doesn't bother you when you're in your 20s. Oh, yeah, turned the radio up loud and had a coffee break. Oh, coffee break, that's a good idea. When you're in your 20s, you can just drive forever. It doesn't bother you. When I arrived home, some sort of madness took hold, and I finally got around to emptying out the very neglected compost wormery that I took after the split. Okay, I have very vague memories of this now that I happen to mention it. I had completely forgotten about it. So I've mentioned in previous episodes that the reason I was living in an attic above a gypsy jazz musician is because I had split up with my fella about a year before, and It was all the rage back then to have a tiger worm compostery. I don't know if that's a word. Is that right? Is there a word, a compostery? A compost bin, basically. So tiger worms apparently could turn anything into compost. So everybody had these plastic bins and you just put your household waste in and then the worms would turn it into compost and then you use the compost. It seemed like a really good idea at the time, but I just didn't take care of it, and it was the most disgusting thing I've ever had to clean out in my life. Seriously, I wrapped it all up in 3 bin liners and you could still smell it. Quite horrendous. I had to bleach, disinfect and seal it bang the backyard. I may have to incinerate the clothes I was wearing. It's done now. Free-cycled the empty shell. Oh my goodness. Oh, that doesn't sound like fun. But at least I did it. I got it done. I vaguely remember that when I was cleaning it all out, there were no worms in there anymore. I think the worms had vacated the bin by that point. Whoops. So 18th, I had my final vaccination ever. So I had my 3rd hepatitis B injection, which I'll need another one a year from now when hopefully I'll be happily settled in my new country. I am now officially invincible. I had to have so many vaccinations for moving to Rwanda. If you want to know more about that, check out the episode on the vaccinations. There are a lot of them. And yeah, now I'm made of metal, you know? I've been vaccinated for everything you can think of. So, okay. What else was going on? Indecent proposal. Sounds interesting. Okay. 19th of September. I just got this through Friends Reunited. So long ago, in the long ago internet, I think it might have even been before Facebook or around the same time, somebody set up a very famous website at the time called Friends Reunited, which allowed people to get in contact with school friends. So the internet was very, very new. People were still figuring out what you could do with it. And Friends Reunited was really the first sort of mass sort of social connection website where literally you could say which school you went to and then you could see who also went there and then you could make contact with lost friends. I think my dad made contact again with his best mate from school. It was a really amazing thing at the time, back when the internet was still, you know, a fascinating frontier, rather than the slurry pit it's kind of turning into now. But so yeah, I was on Friends Reunited and I got this message. My name is Sophie Ridge. I'm a feature writing, doing a background piece. Not a very good one by the look of it, sorry. I shouldn't take the piss, but if you are a feature writer and you call yourself a feature writing. Okay, my name is Sophie Ridge. I'm a feature writer doing a background piece on Amy Winehouse and Kate Nash. They attended the school around the same time you were there. Okay. I'm looking for people who knew them or have pictures of them to get in touch. There's money available for the right information. Contact me in confidence at. Just reading that makes you go a bit. I don't remember this, but wow. Oh my goodness. So Kate Nash, musician, Amy Winehouse, extremely famous musician, died in, let me check, 2011. So she was still very, very much alive at this point. So this is a British paparazzi or journalist trying to dish dirt on Amy Winehouse. So I went to a performing arts school that a lot of quite big musicians went to. I think Adele went there as well, but They were all younger than me. I was like one of the first cohorts through that school. So all the really famous people came long after I left. Oh, hold on a moment. Oh, sorry, a little bit of an interruption from WASAC there, the water agency. All of the houses in Rwanda work off water meters. So once a month, the water department turns up at your house to read the meter in your garden and issue you with a bill. It's very, yeah. So you have to be here and stop what you're doing to go and get your water meter read. Anyway, where were we? Yeah, so that is just that's creepy, isn't it? Like, ooh, give us some information. I'll give you some cash for some information. Dig the dirt. Ugh. That sums up British tabloid. So in the UK, you have different types of papers. So the broadsheet is like your Guardian. It's like the big newspapers, the broadsheets that go into things in detail and explain things and investigate things thoroughly and are very kind of trustworthy sources of news. And then you've got like the tabloid, which is the small papers that just talk trash about everybody, and oh, it's horrible. So yeah, I'm assuming she's a feature writer for a tabloid, but we'll check in a minute. I mean, she gave me her name. We can check who she is. So yeah, Kate Nash and Amy Winehouse, they were both a lot younger than I was. I would have left that school by the time they joined. Even if I had known them, who the hell would read something like the above and think, oh yeah, sounds like a trustworthy individual. She must be desperate to be trawling Friends Reunited. Yeah, it stinks of desperation, doesn't it? Journalistic desperation. Sophie Ridge. I can't help myself. I've got to do this. Let's have a little look who she is. Control copy. Control paste. Sophie Ridge. What? What? What is this? Hold on. No. That can't be right. Really? Sophie Ridge is an English broadcast journalist who has worked for Sky News since 2011. Sky News reporter. Bloody hell, she's a famous reporter. Okay. I mean, no, actually, I need to stop myself here because we don't know. I mean, let's look at Facebook. Hold on. If we look at Facebook, yeah, there are plenty of Sophie Ridges on Facebook. So we can't categorically say it's her. I'm having an idea here. I wonder if I told anybody else about it. I feel like when I got that, I contacted my friends who I was at that school with, and I asked them if they were getting the same thing. Here we are. I kept a copy of it, and I kept a copy of it with her contact intact. So I didn't put her contact details on the blog, but I have got it in this email, and it is an email address at notw.co.uk. Let's see what that website is. Copy and paste. That explains it. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. Okay. So her email address leads to a website for News of the World, and News of the World was one of the trashiest, lowest of the low, scrape the bottom of the fucking barrel UK tabloid newspaper. I mean, they were disgusting. So she was actually telling me to contact her at a News of the World address. I'm going to be the journalist here. I'm going to do a little bit of journalation. Let me journalate. Okay, let's see whether or not Sophie Ridge, and let's try that with News of the World. There's a wiki entry. That's a good start. Yes, same Sophie Ridge. So she graduated from Oxford in English literature and then thought she'd throw herself in with the News of the World. Okay, yeah. Where you need no English literature skills at all. Same lady, now works for Sky News. Okay, so that's who she was. Yeah, all right. I mean, we've all done things early in our careers that we're not proud of. We've all had to do things to make a living, but that's pretty low. And it gives you an insight, I guess, into what famous musicians were dealing with, and probably still do today. I think if Chapel Rowan's rant has anything to go by, things haven't changed very much. Okay, that was an interesting diversion. Let's get back to VSO. What on earth, man? What on earth? Things I don't miss about the UK. Back to gearing up for Rwanda. Okay. Over the past few days, in between packing, I've started considering a few more aspects of my hopefully future job. Still waiting on a departure date though. So that's interesting. I'd actually started pre-departure training, but I hadn't got a departure date yet. That's an interesting limbo to be in. I found a couple more genocide-related clips on YouTube which bring home a very brutal past, notably Ghosts of Rwanda, a 12-part documentary made in 2004, 10 years after the genocide. There are a number of other pieces which are very poignant. One of the more recent uses a song from Hotel Rwanda. As anybody would be, I was force feeding myself information, anything I could find about Rwanda, as that is where I was going. And yeah, it was 13 years after the genocide. So like I said, the internet was a very different place back then, and a lot of the stuff that I was watching has now been removed, like the channels don't exist anymore. But okay, there's one here link. Is that what's the sentence? There's one here link. Is that what's the sentence? Bloody hell, am I having a stroke? What's going on? I've lost my ability to speak. Try again. There's one here that was posted in 2007 and it's still up. So this would have been a video, like cutting edge video at the time that I was preparing to leave. And I will leave this link below for as long as it remains up. It might disappear tomorrow. It was shot in 480p. Nobody shoots in 480p. Nobody's on YouTube in 480p anymore. That's like, I mean, your bare minimum is 720. Almost everybody is 1080. You're watching me at the moment probably in 1080p. So to think 480p was what people were uploading to YouTube on back then. Watching this back now, the image is really bad, like really bad, but yet in my mind I still see it very clearly, because back then it looked good. It looked fine because everything was in 480. So if you don't want to go and see it, it's a montage of images from the genocide. And, I'm not saying that this kind of content is right or wrong. All I'm saying is that this is what I had access to back then. There was so little about Rwanda online back then, so little. And certainly, there weren't really any Kinyarwanda resources. I've talked about this, I couldn't really learn Kinyarwanda online. There were so few people globally on the internet compared to today. It's quite fascinating to look back at. But the video is a montage of images from 94, and they use Wycliffe Jean's Million Voices, was it called? Let me check. So yeah, in 2005, Wycliffe Jean from the Fugees released Million Voices, which was used in the film Hotel Rwanda, which is pretty much the film that everybody in the UK knew. Like, that's pretty much anything that anybody knew about Rwanda was that film. Oh, and so the song, I can't play it for copyright reasons, but you can go have a listen. It's called Million Voices, Wycliffe Jean, and it begins with the most beautiful traditional singing, some kids singing over and over again this song. I can't play it. Can I find the lyrics? Okay, I apologize for brutalizing this song. Something along the lines of Nidyurizabarizageruka hejaruyachu nidyurikazarikaza. Nidyurizabarizageruka hejaruyachu nidyurikazarikaza. And it's just that over and over again. It's beautiful. But then it kind of gets a little bit cheesy later on, because then he goes all sort of American, like, let me play my guitar for Rwanda. And you're like, oh goodness, okay. And then there's some slightly dodgy rhyming. It's like, he says something like, if England is the United Kingdom, then why can't Africa unite all the countries of Africa or something like that? And you're thinking, I mean, yeah, I get what he's saying. But England isn't the United Kingdom. It's part of the United Kingdom. And, you know, we've never been a very united kingdom. Like, the way that we got to be a united kingdom was by basically killing everybody else in the kingdom. So, you know, it might not be the best analogy to make if you're singing a song about peace and reconciliation. That's all I'm saying, you know. But I get what he was trying to express with that. But yeah, the beginning of the song is so beautiful. It's haunting. But sort of, this was what I was watching back then. This is what I had access to, you know. So I was thinking of coming to Rwanda, and that is what I had access to. So, you know, I mean, the internet was a pretty cool place, because I could have had nothing. I could have had absolutely nothing. And so, yeah, it was useful. Right, moving on. What have we got? This is turning into a very odd episode. I'm looking forward to getting back to Harborne Hall. It's been interesting stuff to look at. I'm not sure it really prepares me for a country that has, by all accounts, come a very long way in the past 13 years. But it's helped give me a sense of the history. I'm off to Harborne Hall again in a couple of hours for my second round of training. I vow to spend less time in the bar and more time in the library. Yeah, we really did hit the bar that first time around. Je ne regrette rien. I don't regret anything. I'd do it again. They have an impressive resource library, which is open 24/7. I found a wonderful book there last time, an artist's paintings depicting the genocide. I will look it up again tonight and post the title. The paintings were outstanding. Yes, there is a book, and I still remember the paintings because they were outstanding. I put them on my blog. I'll find it and I'll leave the title up, because it was just the most amazing paintings. And again, I have to reiterate this in every episode. When I say the genocide, don't lay into me, please, because this is a diary that I am reading from 2007 as a British person who had never been to Rwanda, okay? So the official title that you use today and you use in Rwanda is the 1994 Genocide Against the Tutsi. You use the full title, or the Rwandan Genocide Against the Tutsi. But I'm just calling it the genocide then, because that is what back then everybody in the UK would say, and still says today. If you live here, you know differently. But if you are living in the UK, you just say the Rwandan genocide, or, you know, it's not widely known what the full title is. And I'm not going to edit history. I'm not going to edit my blog from back then to make it seem like I knew more than I did, because I didn't. Okay, right. Lecture over. Or yes, in my defense over. Unfortunately, they also have VSO files on each of the countries, and when I randomly opened the one on Rwanda, I saw this story staring back at me. I don't know what this story is. Let's click on it. Okay. I'm probably not going to go into a lot of detail about this. This will come up later on. Essentially, let me see what I wrote. Did I write anything about it? It was a slightly different article which explained more of the circumstances. So this is an article about Charlotte Wilson. She had been a VSO volunteer based in Rwanda who was engaged to a local guy whose family lived in Burundi. At the time, security was such that people were advised never to travel to Burundi, or if they did, only to fly directly to the capital and back. Just to take a break there, when I arrived in Rwanda, that was still the case. We were not allowed to go to DRC because insurance wouldn't cover us. We were not really allowed to go to Burundi. If we had to go to Burundi, and there was no reason why we would, we had to fly to the capital. You could not travel over land between Rwanda and Burundi. Even today, it's still a questionable decision. Whether to do that or not, because there are rebel groups operating in that area. And unfortunately, Charlotte Wilson and her fiancé ran afoul of one of those groups. So despite these warnings, she decided to board a bus with her fiancé and go by road. The bus was ambushed by Hutu militia and everybody on board, including Charlotte and her fiancé, were shot dead. I feel bad reading back that. What was the fiance's name? You can't say Charlotte Wilson and her fiance. Who was her fiance? He needs a name. He needs to have a name the same as she did. Richard Nderiamana. So Richard Nderiamana and Charlotte Wilson. Yeah, so essentially everybody was ordered off the bus and they were shot. But I didn't know this, I'm sitting there at probably late at night if I'm in the resource library, flicking through this folder of where I'm going to be going, feeling all excited, and then bang, I come across Charlotte Wilson and her story and Richard's story. I can still feel a slight tingle. That was quite a thing to read. We'll go into this further down the line because I do actually owe a debt of gratitude to the Charlotte Wilson Foundation, and that will come up later down the road, but her family supported a project I was involved in later on. And a few other things. But if you would like to find out more about that now, her brother wrote a book called Titanic Express because, and I kid you not, the bus company that she rode to Burundi on that got hijacked was called Titanic Express. You couldn't make that up. But yeah, so her brother wrote a book about it, and it is quite interesting because, he knew nothing about these rebel groups until his sister was killed by one. And then he went in to figure out what it was all about, and he explains it quite well. So, it's an introduction for people who don't know much about it. Sorry, I know I'm going on about this. I should have scripted this rather than mumbled on, but if you want to go and read that, I'll leave a link to it below. But that was the first ever time that I heard about Charlotte Wilson and Richard's story. The other current major problem in Africa at the moment appears to be floods, which have been devastating a large proportion of the continent, including Rwanda, where 15 people have died. Yeah, so, that's an annual occurrence every year. Because we are the land of 1,000 hills, everybody lives on hillsides. And when the rain comes down in the rainy season, it can be harsh rain. Of course, the hills just give way. And every year there are fatalities from the rain. And my friend in Kigali says that there's currently an Ebola outbreak in Congo, but near the capital Kinshasa, which is on the other side of the country from Rwanda. Apparently there has never been a case in Rwanda. I've found I've been paying a lot more attention to the BBC African news section recently. Yeah, there's nothing like moving abroad to really focus your mind on local news outlets in that destination. So yeah, like flooding, Ebola is a cyclical problem. It comes up every now and again. Like about 10 years ago when I was heading a human rights program here, and we used to take in human rights students from all over the world. And several of them had to pull out because they were in Ebola-stricken regions. And Rwanda is really good at locking that shit down. The minute that there was a hint of it, it's like, no, close the airports to people coming from those regions. It's like COVID. We handled that so well. Marburg, we got it. But again, it was handled so well. We're pretty good at controlling pandemic style situations, and still I don't think that there has been an Ebola outbreak in Rwanda. I don't think there's been a case in Rwanda, but because we were preparing for an Ebola outbreak, because it reached Goma, which is just over the border from Gisenyi in northern Rwanda. So several years ago, we had an Ebola outbreak in Goma, and we were all expecting it to come across to Rwanda. So there were all of these isolation wards were built and set up on the border with Goma. And then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, we were all just saying like, oh, right, you know, we were expecting a pandemic, but not this one. But because we were already so prepared for an Ebola outbreak and we had all of these isolation tents and everything, our response here to COVID was lightning quick, and we had everything set up. So, you know, it was handled really, really well. So, you know, one tragic and awful situation kind of helped us to prepare to manage another tragic and awful situation that nobody had expected. It was a bit of a weird twist of fate, that one. Oh my goodness. Okay, so in this last little paragraph here, I'm talking about my concerns about taking malaria prophylaxis, like what the options are, like Lariam, doxycycline, oof, all of these, and, you know, not really knowing which one's a good idea. And I say, however, I've been reading up about a natural Chinese herbal remedy called, I'm sorry if I butcher this, in Chinese I think it's Qinghao, or artemisinin. It's not cheap, but apparently it can attack and kill the malaria virus post-infection, as well as being a prophylaxis. I'm considering buying a supply to take with me so I can take it if I get bitten or ill. Okay, so the reason this is quite funny to me is because I'm like, oh, this really brand new drug. Oh, I wonder if anybody's heard about it. It's derived from an ancient Chinese herb. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It is now today the cure for the type of malaria that we have here, because the drug that I'm talking about there is coartem, and coartem is what you take if you get malaria. So it had been known about in China for hundreds of years. Like the Chinese had this locked down, they knew what this was, but for the West it was kind of like this new miracle drug. I think there's a book called The Fever by Sonia Shah. This is a really interesting read. It doesn't look it, but it's a very interesting read. All about the history of malaria. And she goes into some detail about, you know, how the Chinese had come up with this ages ago, and like the West were like just discovering it. It's like, oh wow, yeah, we can cure people from malaria. Yeah, so today coartem is standard, but back then in 2007 I think it was, I don't know if it had been on the market. I'll have to check. If you want to know more about living in a malaria zone, I've done a whole video about it. It's kind of a long video, but it covers everything to do with living in a malaria zone, or at least living here. Right, so I was heading back to Harborne Hall for another training session. Anyway, I better get myself out the door. Just finished reading Ben Elton's Chart Throb. Was okay, good initial idea, but dragged a bit. Oh yeah, I think that was his parody of Simon Cowell and the X Factor, from what I remember. From my last trip, I'm going armed with some books this time to try and keep myself away from the bar. I don't think that worked. I think I probably read and drank. You know, you can read and pick up a pint at the same time. See you all when I get back. Here's hoping for a good night's sleep and arriving in time for dinner. So I'm going to leave off there. We'll cover the next training session in the next video, because I just wanted to take a second to look through the information pack that I had about Rwanda. So let's have a look. Okay, this is fascinating because this is VSO Rwanda Programme Office Culture Guide to Rwanda. This is the guide to Rwandan culture that we were issued pre-departure. I need you to bear in mind, this is almost 20 years old, okay? So what was written there, or maybe the way it was phrased, I don't know. I haven't read it yet, or I haven't read it in a very long time. Might not be the way that it would be presented today, but this is a true and accurate representation of what I knew before I came here. And I'll leave it below as a download. Introduction. Rwanda is a small country in Africa that was not worldwide known. That's interesting phrasing. That was not worldwide known until 1994, when a horrific genocide took place that shocked and horrified Rwandans as well as the rest of the world. The country has undertaken a process of rebuilding itself, and with this guide, we hope to introduce you to some elements of the culture that are both positive and enduring. So you will begin to understand why people might act or talk as they do. You cannot automatically assume that people's reactions and values will be the same as yours, and it helps to be aware of these differences. I mean, everything that you got from VSO was very grounded. I mean, their entire focus was on preparing you well enough that when you got there, you weren't so shocked you went home again. You know, they wanted to be upfront and honest about things. And, you know, decades of VSOs who had been there before, the knowledge was passed down. Everything was done to try to prepare you so that when you got there, you settled there rather than leaving again, because these were 2-year placements. Okay, so we know quite a lot about the past. Let's keep going. Okay, language. As mentioned above, all Rwandans, if they have grown up in Rwanda or in a Rwandan community elsewhere, speak Kinyarwanda as their mother tongue. Greetings. Africans generally, and Rwandans in particular, like to shake hands when greeting one another. Absolutely. Oh, wow. Okay. It is expected that each time you meet work colleagues, strangers, neighbours, parents, friends, etc., that you will shake hands with them. It does not matter whether you were together in the morning and you meet again in the afternoon, you shake hands again. Rwandans are more physical when greeting friends, parents, relatives, or other people whom they haven't seen for a long time or even a short time. And they usually embrace, 3 quick hugs, and then shake hands. It is also quite normal to embrace someone that you have never met before. It shows that you are pleased to meet them. Rwandans know that not all foreigners are familiar or comfortable with this gesture, so will be content if you just shake hands. Yes, yeah, I mean, because especially British, we're known for our sort of... we need a lot of personal space. Like British people, we might shake hands if we're going into, say, an interview or a formal situation. Most of the time, even with friends and neighbours, we're happy just to stand back and give a little wave. You know, we're not tactile in that way. But oh my goodness, the moment that you set foot on the continent of Africa, you are going to learn so many elaborate handshakes. I had a colleague, I still don't know how he did it, but you'd shake hands and he'd flick his thumb off your thumb and it would make a click. I've tried all my life to recreate that and I can't do it. But I think what he actually probably did was cross his hand over my hand and do that. But it felt like he was clicking off my thumb. It was fascinating. And also, there was a type of Rwandan greeting that I've only had it about 3 times, but I felt so privileged when I did. And I don't use that term lightly. It's a very Rwandan greeting where you touch foreheads, 1, 2, and then either to the side again or to the centre. And again, with people that I'd never met before, and an elderly woman in particular who took my hand, and the first time she met me, she did that. It's a really interesting, I don't know how to explain it. You know, as a British person, tactile touching of any kind is extremely uncomfortable to begin with, because as British people, we live in fear of making an idiot of ourselves or not knowing what the culture or the custom is and accidentally offending people by doing it wrong. It is mortifying for us. And so because there are all these different handshakes, you're not sure what's coming next. Is somebody just going to shake, or are they going to pull you in for a tap, or are they going to do that? Or what are you supposed to do? You know, we like to know exactly what the rules are before we go into something so that we do it right. And of course, in Africa, it's much more go with with the flow. It's like, yeah, whatever, yeah. It always felt very, very uncomfortable, except for that head touch. I don't know. It was just so intimate. And I don't know. When I say I felt privileged that somebody, would embrace me enough to do that, it felt really nice. You don't tend to see this anymore. I mean, it does still happen, I think, amongst family and friends in the villages, but you don't really see that so much anymore now. And a lot of the time in Kigali, people will shake hands, but it's just a formal shake and that's it. I see a lot fewer variations used with foreigners nowadays. So I don't know. I feel like the art of inventive handshaking is dying. I don't know. So there's some information here on dressing and some information on food. Actually, this is quite interesting because it goes into what a traditional meal for a Rwandan family is. Again, download this if you want to read it. It's really interesting information. It says the last time this document was updated was 2004, so 10 years after 94, 10 years after the genocide against the Tutsi. It says here about the beers. Back then it was Primus, Mutzig and Guinness, which is really interesting because Primus and Mutzig are still very big brand beers here today, but Guinness, you never see Guinness anymore. And also the type of Guinness that you got was really scary. I think it was Nigerian Guinness, which is a whole different ball game. Basically, it had the consistency of Marmite pretty much. You could stand a spoon up in it. I'm joking, but I'm exaggerating, but it was strong. It wasn't what I think the Irish would respectfully call Guinness. It talks about family life and family structure. Talks about religion. And this is quite interesting. So it talks about intimate relationships and romantic relationships. I don't think it uses the word romance, but it does talk about that because, that was a good thing about VSO. I think still is a good thing about VSO is, you were treated as an adult. You are an adult coming into this. And so they are under no illusion that if you're going to go and live somewhere for 2 years of your life, that you are likely to have a relationship with somebody at some point. And they really did. I'd probably go into this in the training session at Harbin, but they really did sit us down and give us the talk about the birds and the bees, and health education and social education. So in matters of intimate relationships, the key principle is discretion. There's some really interesting information in here. Because it's stuff that you need to know. There's a bit here on respect and authority, which if you're coming from certain Western countries, like myself in the UK, you really need to pay attention to this bit. This is talking to you. And it also says here that even in 2004, so over 20 years ago, smoking in public was not really the done thing. It still isn't today. It's extremely rare to walk around in Rwanda and see people smoking in public. I have a friend who's a mechanic. He's a chain smoker, and, a lot of expats did used to smoke. You see it so rarely now anymore. And more bars will not even give you an ashtray. It's like, nah. But it's interesting to see that even 20 years ago, this was important in the country. Oh, this is interesting. There's a section here on Mazungi. Love it. Right, let's see what it says. Because Muzungu, if you don't know, Muzungu is the word for foreigner. The minute you set foot in any rural area or off the back streets of Kigali, you will have children, sometimes adults, just Mazungu shouting it at you for no particular reason. On a good day, it's hilarious, and on a bad day, it's really annoying. But let's see what they said back in 2004 about the word Muzungu. Well, Muzungu was a concept that was created by Rwandans at the early stages of colonization to mean the white people who have ousted the local leaders. Generically, it draws from the verb kuzungura, replace or secede. Oh no, this is really interesting. I must have read this back then, but I've forgotten it because this is not the explanation you usually get. At that period, it meant the colonisers who had taken the place of the king and his traditional hierarchy. Unfortunately, the colonisers were Europeans, and later on the term Umuzungu was extended to designate all the white people, regardless of whether they were colonisers or not. Nowadays, when people say Umuzungu, they mean white man or woman only. Most people will say it aloud whenever they see a white person. It is not in any way derogatory. Is it never derogatory? Never derogatory? Though when it has been shouted at you 100 times a day by the kids on the street, it can seem so. Instead, remember that this is probably the only way the kids know to greet you. If you have time, stop and greet them. Abana mwidiwe. Teach them to say good morning or tell them your name. Sooner or later, Rwandans will kick the Muzungu calling habit. In the meantime, just grin and bear it. Yeah, that can sound a little condescending, but you know, when you have it shouted at you all day, every day. There was a hilarious story. It'll probably come up way later on in this series, but my friend, she was teaching in a school in a rural village, and she's standing there at the front of the class teaching, and she notices that there's a note being passed around the class, and you know, she ignores it for a while, but then eventually it's like just give me the note. She gets the note, she opens it, and all it says is Muzungu. It's like it's still a thing. It's not as bad as it used to be. I mean, I used to get touched walking down the street. People would come and just touch me. Yeah, so it's not that anymore. But you still get it sometimes. It's definitely a lot less than it used to be, but it definitely still happens. And, you know, they were just putting it in there because you need to know this thing. If you know and you're prepared, you can cope and you can find coping strategies. But if you get there and you don't know this thing, then it's 10 times more stressful. So this is interesting. But the thing that really interests me about this, I'm curious. Umuzungu was a concept that was created by Rwandans at the early stages of colonization, was it? Because you get Muzungu in Uganda. You're just as likely to get called Muzungu in Uganda. I don't know about Kenya. I don't know what the word is in Kenya. But then Uganda and Rwanda are very closely tied in terms of languages. And so I don't know. Okay. Rwandans, tell me, Rwandans, does that sound correct to you? If you know the history of Kinyarwanda, does that sound correct to you? Conclusion. The Rwandan culture is a huge subject that cannot be covered in these few pages. This is only a brief introduction that can help you to understand some interesting features. There is something new to discover every day about Rwanda that may even differ from what you have heard about before or read here. The best starting point would be to live with Rwandans, get involved in their realities, learn from them. We believe that after some time, you will have piled up lots of experience and learning, enabling you to share it with others, especially with us. Yeah, I mean, I think they took a really good approach. You know, it's like, well, this is what volunteers have told us and our program staff. This would have been compiled by foreign volunteers in Rwanda and by the Rwandan program staff who would have read this as well, I'd imagine, and given their input and backgrounds. So, you know, and they were constantly updating things along the way. So that was 2004. So that was written 3 years before I received it. And a lot of it is still quite true to this day. Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. If you want to read the whole thing, I'll leave a link below. See you in the next one.